I'd like to call to order the meeting of June 1st, 2021 of the Planning and Zoning Board. May we please have a roll call for attendance, please?
Tom Black.
Here.
Pat Doherty.
Here.
Aaron Beatty.
Here.
Raymond Layton.
Here.
Ann Shout. Marshall Ballard.
Here.
Martin John. Marcus Simmons. Travis Oakley.
Here.
Samuel Woodruff.
Here.
Got a quorum.
We have a quorum. Now, the first item of new business is Belle Oaks. Avolis Engineering are requesting subdivision final plan approval for the Belle Oaks Phase V-A, a planned unit development of a 26 lot residential. This section of the multi-phase development is located on the combined approximately 24.02 acres in the R-10S Residential District. The site is located to the east of Greenleaf Cemetary Road and to the south of Martin Luther King Boulevard. Staff presentation, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The board members, board gave this subdivision preliminary approval back in June of 2020. An average lot size of 6,047 square feet, 1,000 linear feet of new roads. Got 4 acres of common area, and everything is, all utilities are provided by the City of New Bern. You remember here is the entire site. That got preliminary approval back in June. The section seeking final down here. We have reviewed it, meets all the requirements of 1579. Staff is recommending approval. The applicant is here if you have any questions.
Does the applicant wish to address this board on this recommendation of this application?
No, I'll just be glad to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from this board to the applicant concerning this development?
Don, I just had one question. Who's the builder? Do we know that yet?
Not certainly. No. No.
Are there any other questions?
Jeff, my standard question, I saw the check for the bond. Have we received the performance bond? Has Scott's office approved that?
Nadia?
Yes, we have it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
So everything is completely in order then. Are there any members of the public that wish to either comment for or against this application? Having heard none, the chair would like to entertain a motion for the approval of the Belle Oaks. As my understanding, this is the final approval, and we are the ones who make such approval on this item.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is the motion seconded?
Second.
Okay. Do we have a roll call, please, on the vote?
Tom Black.
Yes.
Pat Doherty.
Yes.
Aaron Beatty.
Yes.
Raymond Layton.
Yes.
Marshall Ballard.
Here, yes.
Yes.
Come right here. You're not talking.
Travis Oakley.
Yes.
And Samuel Woodruff.
Yes.
Excuse me, sir, but could you speak up a little more, please?
Sure.
Your voice is faded.
I'll be glad to speak up more. Like I said, the motion carried.
Motion carried unanimously. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Hughes, the city engineer concerning the water and wastewater treatment.
I'll throw it. So, as you know, the board's been asking a lot about the city's capacity to serve new developments. Greater than 30, the biggest question y'all have about being able to serve. The best way to do it is to bring in the expert. I've had this conversation with Jordan many times. And even though he is city engineer, dealing with water and wastewater, he'll answer any questions you have that you would have directed to Mr. Bauschard, who's our director of our utilities department. So Jordan has filled in on many occasions as the acting director in that department. He's very versed in everything utility related in the city. So we decided to ask Jordan to come and answer your questions and give a little overview of our capacity situations that we have in different sections of the city, west and south, and how we addressed them in the past and how we will continue to address them as the future moves on. So we'll just start with the big capacity expansion that we did a few years back and what that did, what that gave us. I guess
Okay.
that'll open up a good question.
So I think I know several of you around the room, but for those that don't know me, my name's Jordan Hughes. I'm the city engineer. I've been working for the city in that capacity for about 15 years. As Jeff mentioned, my main function of New Bern is to manage our water and wastewater operations, everything from water production to distribution and collection to wastewater treatment. So we take care of everything through the whole process and make sure all of our customers have ample supply of domestic water, our firefighters have fire flow, and we handle all of our wastewater properly. It's discharged in a manner that complies with all our state permits. In regards to capacity, let me ease your mind, hopefully initially a little bit, and first by saying any time a project would get to this level for approval, it's been vetted through our internal staff, sometimes for years, as we're working with engineers, working with developers on projects. The Craven 30 is a good example, to make sure that, one, we have capacity to accommodate the growth for the new development, any distribution improvements that need to be put in place are required by the developer to put those in as they go. We have a process in North Carolina through our state permits with Department of Environment and Natural Resources or Department of Natural Quality that require the city to ensure that capacity is there. So I'll give you an example. The Belle Oaks project is a good example. As the Belle Oaks project came across our desk probably a year ago, maybe a little longer than that, they first come to the city and say, hey, we're looking to build this. What do we need to do? The first step is a department review. They come through the department review. All the city departments make comments on that. From the water and wastewater side, if it requires an extension, we work with the engineer, work with developers on permitting that extension through the state of North Carolina. It's kind of a fail-safe. That permitting process through the state of North Carolina, we must prove to the state of North Carolina that there is ample capacity in the New Bern treatment and distribution system and collection systems to accommodate that new development and the demand for that new development. So we have to ensure that that capacity is there to get a permit from the state of North Carolina to allow the developer to even start working on that initial infrastructure. So that's the good news for you, is that those things are all taken care of well in advance of ever getting to this level where they're looking for that final approval, that plat approval. All the capacity issues on the water wastewater side have been well vetted and permitted through the state, and it's all taken care of. So it's something that you really don't need to worry too much about it at this level. It's something at staff level and working through the process has been established in the state. These things get kind of vetted out very well. It almost gets impossible, I think legally impossible, to bring you a project for approval that we do not have the capacity for. If we do not have the capacity for the project, it will never get to a level where you have to issue a final approval on it. Maybe that eases some of the concerns. But I could sit here and talk for the next 3 hours on the water and wastewater systems and New Bern, but everybody to sleep. But I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you have, water, wastewater, electric, capacity, what we've got, where we've got it. Maybe easier just to answer questions and me just ramble for 2 hours.
So you have a pretty defined idea how much capacity you currently have at the sewage treatment plant.
Sure. So we permitted by the state of North Carolina for our water and wastewater. We operate. I've got dozens of operational permits for both of our water and wastewater systems. In a nutshell, our wastewater treatment plant is permitted for 6.5 million gallons of discharged effluent a day.
And what does that mean per person? Is there a ratio there?
It varies. On permit capacity, when we're permitting for new capacity, we allocate 120 gallons per bedroom per day. That's a state allocation rate. It's different by commercial, it's different by institutional or industrial. but most of our growth, our development is residential, so it's 120 gallons per bedroom per day is what we allocate for permits when we permit everything through the state for residential. With our 6.5 million gallons of capacity, we're running about 3.7 million gallons through the plant on average right now, is what our average daily flow through the plant is. So we're a little over half of our plant capacity. The good news, and this is...
So right now, you're at half the capacity.
A little more than half. About 55% capacity is what we're running through our wastewater treatment plant.
So you have the capacity nearly double of what...
Just about double Newbern. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years in Newbern, and we were running about the same numbers through the treatment plant 15 years ago. So think of all the growth and development we've added in Newbern in the last 15 years, and there's whole neighborhoods that didn't exist. We've got about the same amount of water going out, about the same amount of sewage coming in. And that's largely thanks to conservation. You've got forced conservation and conscious conservation.
Now, I understand, I'm not in your sewer district at all, I'm in the ETJ.
Okay.
And we were told that we are charged sewage fees based on the water that's metered to us that we use.
Correct.
How do you measure your waste, your gray water?
We don't. We don't, at a customer level, we do not meter sewage. We basically,
Do you have an idea what your total comes in?
yeah, now we do monitor it. We have inflow flow monitors in different parts of the system, at pump stations, and as well as at our treatment works at our treatment plant. We know exactly how much comes into the plant, but we're not monitoring it at each customer like we are on the water system with water meters.
And how close are the numbers of water consumption compared to the sewage that you charge for?
It's different because for a lot of reasons. One, we're dealing with a different group of customers.
Some people have lawns they water.
That's right. So we've got a group of customers that have water and sewer, and that's probably 80% of our customers. We have a group of customers that are water only. We send water to that are on septic. We have a group of customers that we don't supply the water to, but we do provide the sewer service. Most of those are in the James City area. So we don't have a uniform group of water and sewer customers to make that easy comparison of water out, sewer in. But by and large, you get a fairly consistent amount of water that comes into the treatment plant. Isn't that much different than what goes out in the wastewater treatment plant if you've got a uniform system of equal number of water and sewer customers.
In your sewage treatment, do you use precipitates as all, like lime or whatnot, to try to get rid of as much nitrogen and phosphorus to prevent the algae blooms and whatnot into the river?
We don't use any lime in our nutrient removal. We do use lime in our sludge stabilization. We use lime as a heating agent as we're trying to basically pasteurize our Class A biosolids that we produce at the plant.
And you talk about sludge. How is that handled?
We have two ways of handling that. We produce a Class A biosolid, so literally it's inert. You can take it, put it in there are some residual nutrients in it, very little though, a little bit of nitrogen, a little bit of phosphorus, very little though, plus the lime that we add to it to get it to the heat level we want to kill pathogens. It is inert, and you can do anything you want to with it. You can come pick up some of your pickup truck and put it in your flower garden if you'd like.
Like the city of Detroit, for example, they make a product called Relevance that they sell throughout the country.
Yep.
The only problem with it, it has heavy metals in it.
All right, so what we do, we've got a group of local farmers that aren't too far around that on occasion like it for soil stabilization in some places. We do supply that to them at no charge. The bulk of it goes to Tuscarora, to the landfill. They mix it with other inert material they use for slope stabilization. So as they're closing cells and they're getting those nice grass slopes, they're using that as part of the product that's helping to basically stabilize those slopes.
Are there any other questions?
I got one. Do you have a projected time that you have to enlarge the machinery for capacity?
Great question. For our water permit with the state, you basically have to do a report every year called a local water supply plan. Every water purveyor in North Carolina has to do the same thing. With that, you take a bunch of data and you project when you're going to run out of supply, when your demand is going to exceed your supply, you've got to look for more water. You got to have a new plant, a new water supply source. We just got done doing that about a month ago, and you have to look at your projections in 10 years. So we look at your 2020, your 2030, 2040. Based off the local supply plan we've just completed, we will be 88% of water capacity in the year 2060. We'll be at 102% in 2070. So somewhere beyond some of the 2060 range, we need to start looking at another supply of water. We're going to run out of water well into the future. So we're running less than 50% of our water capacity, our available capacity now in the water system. Long ways on the road.
That led me to want to ask this now. Our water, is it through the aquifers underground, or is it through the river that we pull and rinse, clean?
Great question. Our water supply in New Bern is through a couple of different aquifers. All of it's groundwater. About 75% of our available water supply comes from the Castle Hayne aquifer, a little shallow.
Wow.
And about 25% comes from the Black Creek aquifer, which is a little further west and a lot deeper. We blend that water together at a 50-50 blend in order to make the most cost-effective product we can and the most stable product we can send to customers. But it's all groundwater. You get much further west than New Bern, everybody's surface water plants. So Kinston, Greenville, and further west are surface water. Everybody towards the coast is more groundwater.
My goose is cooked.
Now, you're also responsible for the electrical capacity?
No, but I can talk somewhat intelligently about it if you got any questions.
I bet you was in the plumbing business.
Where does our electricity largely come from currently?
All of our electricity comes from Duke. We're a wholesale Duke customer that we have power supply contracts through the KEMPA, which is the North Carolina Power Agency. There's a group of municipalities that are grouped together. We used to own a percentage in in power production plants. We sold those rights to Duke years ago as part of an agreement. Now we just buy all of our electricity as a wholesale group contract through Duke projects.
And most of it's from the national grid?
It's through Duke, yeah, so it all comes through Duke transmission. Duke gets theirs through various supply sources, everything from traditional hydro and nuclear, natural gas, solar, wind, wood energy type, biomass products. Duke's got a pretty diverse energy portfolio. It all goes to the same transmission network, and that's what we pull off.
I would like to go back to the water questions. Largely, you are responsible for the potable water. I imagine the sewage treatment plant, you need water. Are you also using potable water for that? Or do we have a non-potable water supply as well?
We do have a reuse system. We've got a couple of reuse customers. One is McElwain Turf Farm out on the western side of about 55, 43 that way. The other is Creekside Park over in James City. The county is a reuse customer with our little sewage system over there. So we do have a couple of reuse systems. We don't have a very extensive
I'm not
reuse
familiar with that term, reuse. Can you explain that to me?
Gray water, non-potable. Yeah, so it's the same water we would send to the river as effluent, as discharge, clean wastewater. We have a way to divert that to other customers and use it for non-potable sources. The only people that have really we've been able to get connected as a true customer are McElwain Turf Farm and the Creekside Farm, where they irrigate the turf, the ball field.
And that was largely untreated?
No, it's 100% treated. It's the same water it's treated to the exact same standards we would discharge to the river. The only difference is we just divert it and we send that little bit to the
Which means that you had to put in a distribution system, i.e. pipes and whatnot.
Correct. Correct. All that was put in through Clean Water Management Trust Fund grants back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
And he had more, I mean, obviously it'd be great if he had more.
We've tried to get more people on. Unfortunately, it really takes a large water user for it to be cost effective. Industrial processes, they've largely converted to recycling water on site. They've done a pretty good job in most of industrial processes of, instead of just using a ton of water and sending all of it out, They're putting in little small reverse osmosis plants in the industrial applications and reusing water on site. That's the most cost-effective way for them to operate. And golf courses around here, unfortunately, have their own supply of good irrigation, which is the pond water, basically. It's all the nice stormwater ponds they use for stormwater management, as well as aesthetics on the golf courses. They'll pump out of those irrigation and get all they need.
And there are also many people also use their own wells.
Correct.
And one of the problems with well water around here is it's very high in iron levels, and the trees actually rust on the side.
You can certainly get a lot of iron out of a shallow well.
So what are the responsibilities does Public Works have from a utility standpoint? We spoke about both the drinking water, reused water, and the sewer, the gray water, and it's largely gray water. Does the city have any plans, like other cities, to do away with septic tanks and do straight sewer?
We pretty much have. At this point, if we have infrastructure within the city limits, let me back up. Within the city limits is the one place we have authority to, I think, really regulate getting you off of a septic tank and making you go in the sewer system. To my knowledge, we've probably got less than a couple handfuls of septic customers left in New Bern. And when those fail, we have infrastructure in place to convert those into the municipal system.
And that's where most of the sludge would come from.
No, we get sludge as your typical wastewater, conventional wastewater process produces a lot of sludge. So all of your water goes out, gets processed, treated, and heads out to the river. The solids that are left, the residual solids, is what creates that Class A biosolids product.
Now, I would think it would cost more to process the gray water as opposed to straight sewage. I mean, the vice versa, sewage would be more expensive to process than gray water.
It is. Yeah, a conventional sewer system is more expensive to operate than an alternative system like a step sewer system, where you're only getting the gray water. You've got another level of solids removal and grit removal, and you have to have a bioproduct that you have to do something with at the end, a biosolid. We have both systems in New Bern. We have a conventional sewage system and treatment plant. We also have an alternative step sewer system and plant.
West New Bern is considerably farther than the historic district of New Bern to the sewage treatment.
Actually closer.
It is close.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to be straight sewage treatment?
Conventional, yeah, everything within the municipal limits of New Bern is covered under a conventional sewer system. Our little step sewer system is basically James City.
The large developments in West New Bern, that could be, there's no need for septic tanks there, right?
No septic tanks. Everything will come right to us. As well as any other new development inside of New Bern. Everything comes straight to us. No septic tanks.
I did not know that. It was planned to be different. When did that change?
Decades.
It's been many years ago.
Decades.
It's been many years ago. Because I remember we people wanted to battle us over it, and I'm like, ain't got nothing to do with it.
If memory serves me, the very first phase of Greenbrier, which would have been mid-'80s, they had a couple of roads they started on septic tanks and maybe 20, 25 lots. I think those are the last septic tanks that were permitted in New Bern. That would have been, like I said, mid-'80s. So 30 years ago. So
Now, in many older towns, we know that there's a problem of stormwater going to many people's sewers. And how bad of a problem is that in the historic district?
it was bad at one time. We've done a lot of evaluation of that through sanitary sewer surveys and evaluation studies over the years, and largely identified where those cross connections from the storm sewer into the gravity sewer were and eliminated those. We still find one every now and then.
Yeah, but a lot of people down their homes, they would have gutters or whatnot. They'll find their way.
Yep, and we rectify that with smoke testing. So we go through the town periodically in areas like that, and we'll basically send smoke through the sanitary system. Anytime you see it coming up the gutters in a house, you know there's a cross connection. When we identify those, we get them eliminated. We make sure those are separated so that stormwater runoff is not going through the sanitary system. But it's fresh water, we've got a treatment plant.
May I ask a push question?
Yes, sir.
Since the septic thing came up, I live in Greenbrier in the first section.
Okay.
So this, I went to your office a few times, but I couldn't get it. I didn't understand the answer or I asked it incorrectly.
Okay.
Asked the question incorrectly. So those earlier homes, 1986, 87, so on, in the front part of Greenbrier, if they were wanted to convert to the sewer system, I was told that they could do that, they still have a step system.
Correct.
Yeah, so what is the advantages to do that? 'Cause
Well, the advantage is
resulting
if
in
your
price.
drain field fails, you
Well,
gotta do
right, so
something.
you can't get it repaired then if it
That's right,
fails.
you gotta have something to do. So the step system is an alternative sewer system where essentially we're getting, you keep a tank on site, the solids still go in the
Right.
tank, and instead of the water, so the gray water going out to the drain field, we basically put a little pump system in that collects that water and sends it to the treatment works.
Yeah, I understand that, but can those residents ever say, no, I don't want to go on, I'm going to get rid of my tanks and everything and just going to be complete sewer?
What we have there, what we have those first couple of streets, Penny Roll, and I forget the other ones.
Rosemary, all those.
Rosemary, that's right. No, the step system is what we have for a municipal sewer option.
Okay.
Does that have something to do with they wouldn't reach by gravity?
The step system is an alternative sewer. In most of the time, it's a post-construction alternative. So you have somewhere that the neighborhood's already built, the streets, roads, houses are built. The step system gives you a way to get municipal sewer in there, which would be very difficult to put traditional gravity in after the fact. You build a traditional neighborhood, the gravity sewer system is the very first thing you put in, after building roads and everything else. It's hard to go back and do that once the entire neighborhood is built.
So basically, the step system is essentially a tank that goes to a lift station?
Pretty much, you have a small pump on site every home that collects the water that would typically go in the drain field and just leach out in the yard. We collect that water once the drain field has failed. We have a pit that water will collect in. We pump it to a small collection system, small diameter pipes, 2 to 4 inch pipes that run along the streets. And then ultimately that makes it back to some other point in the collection system and flows to the treatment plant.
Who does the testing for the potable water and the wastewater?
We have state certified labs in-house. We have our own lab staff that does all of our state certified testing. It's required by.
So it's not independent, then
Yes, sir.
it's within your thing as they have to abide by. And are there ever inspection audits by third parties?
We have annual inspections from state agencies for every one of our operational permits, whether it be a distribution permit or a treatment plant permit. We're required every year they come in, look at what we're doing, make sure we're doing it, by the conditions of the permit. We get reports back on that, or things something we need to clean up, we get a report back on that. All of our inspections I've been here have been kind of clean bills of health, they do inspections.
Sir, I just have a question, shift gears just a little bit. So as the capacity grows, do you feel right now that you have an appropriate amount of staff to handle everything?
Yeah, because for the water and wastewater side of things, we don't, a new development doesn't add a lot of demand to us. The way those things are built, the developer puts in the infrastructure as they're building it with their contractors. It doesn't take a lot of effort from the city. We have some inspection staff, we have some staff setting water meters, getting things like that set up. But as far as a brand new development, we have very little to do. Once it's built, people start moving in and everybody's occupied the homes. There's not a lot of demand there. Our staff is working in these areas,
Right.
the places where the infrastructure was put in 75 or 80 years ago. We're going through and rehabbing, we're fixing service lines that are breaking. That's where the bulk of our time is spent.
Sure.
And with the treatment plants, they're doing everything 24/7. But the field staff spends more of their time in the older areas than they do in the new ones.
So with that being said, do you feel like the folks that are actually in the field, do you feel like you have like an adequate amount of folks?
We do.
Okay.
We got a very efficient operation. We got folks that are trained to do a lot of different things. So nobody's kind of sitting around like a Maytag repairman, twiddling thumbs, waiting for the next, waiting for the phone call. They stay pretty busy. We do run a 24/7, 365 operation. I'll bet my truck there's somebody tonight going to be one of our own call staff doing something somewhere in the middle of the night tonight. We pretty much work every day, every night. It's just the way it is.
From what I've seen, I think they do a fantastic job.
Appreciate that.
Now, I understand that there might be some lift stations needed for West New Bern.
They've got one large one out there now that was put in when they first started developing it's Craven 30, 7 or 8 years ago. Then we'll probably need one or two more as they continue to develop out the entire 400 or 500 acre site.
Now, in lieu of the hurricanes and power outages, they all have, each of these lift stations have their own emergency?
They
power?
do. Anything that's of substantial size, anything that requires a demand of more than 15,000 gallons per day, which is about 50 houses, is required by state as part of that permitting process, are required to have on-site backup generator with automatic transfer switch as part of the permitting process. So those things go in as part of the initial construction.
Are there any other questions? This board would like to thank you for taking time in your evening to address our concerns here. So you basically told us that according to your projections, the limiting factor, you believe, is the potable water, and that we're good till something like 2060 before expansion is needed, according to your studies.
Yeah, we've got a lot of, there's a lot of things that keep me up at night. Our capacity issues are not one of them. We've got a very good capacity, both our water and wastewater systems. We've got a lot of projects we're working on for as improving old infrastructure, doing rehab work, making some improvements for fire flows and distribution issues. But as far as our overall capacity to be able to serve new development, luckily, my predecessors had the foresight to set everything up. That's one thing I haven't had to worry a lot about. That's awesome.
Well, we would like to thank you for your presentation.
Not a problem. And Jeff's got all my direct contact information. If anybody has any more questions, anything pops in your mind, feel free to shoot me a phone call or email, and we'll try to get you any answer.
Well, my concerns are greatly allayed.
All right, y'all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Jordan.
Appreciate it.
Indeed.
Okay, so now we go to item 2C.
D.
D, okay. That is, I imagine that Scott would like to address us. This is, we consider an amendment to the City of New Bern land ordinance regarding planning and zoning code sections to be consistent with North Carolina General Statute, chapters 160D, as well as eliminating two extraterritorial which, parentheses, DJT, so reading the typo seats Bartolo 7 seats rather than 9 seats. And I've had some discussions with some people, but why don't we first hear from Mr. Davis? He can address us accordingly and give us an overview about this, as he was so kind to do so this afternoon with me. You have the floor, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Scott Davis, City Attorney. Before I first start, fun fact, following up on Jordan's presentation, my first legal project for the City of New Bern this summer of 1992 was a construction dispute over the completion of the Glen Burnie sewer plant, where the board at that time doubled that capacity to 6.4 million gallons. So in my entire career, that's be 30 years next year, they've added about a million gallons of sewer use in all of those years, interestingly because of the conservation and whatnot.
Well, that's proof positive that attorneys do get their hands dirty.
Well done. For starters, there are three issues that I want to talk to you about tonight, and I'm going to hit them in reverse order. They'll make more sense. Point one, I come in peace. Okay? I'm going to start big picture first. Big picture. Why am I even here tonight talking about what seems like political issues and Board of Alderman issues? Appearance Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, Planning and Zoning Board, Board of Adjustment are all boards created under Chapter 19 of 160A of our land use code. And because those boards are created under that land use section, the statute can be read, and I think fairly read, to mean that any amendment to the land use ordinance comes through you for a recommendation to the extent you want to give one. Even though typically we are talking about land use stuff. zoning changes, the size of streets, all those regulatory issues are the typical reasons you're here. I've never come through this board before to have to deal with these issues, but legally, we do this step even though these issues are administrative and almost entirely political. Point one. I'm going to use the HPC as an example to illustrate the issues that the city and the Board of Aldermen have been dealing with for a very long time. Around 2010, it came to my attention that the appointments on the various boards were not being timely made, and that happens. In fact, you're two good examples, right? You're here and we appreciate you being here. Sometimes appointments are late. Sometimes people resign, they move away or resign midterm. Well, as staff turns over and processes change, those new officials are put in the books as of their start date and told that they have a 3-year term. And that happens and it rolls on and it rolls on and the decades go by, and then we recognize, well, wait a minute. This board used to have staggered terms, and now it's all catawampus. People are coming and going on different years, weird years. How did this possibly happen? So in 2010, I took on the project of trying to untangle the history of 11 different boards in the city and why all the terms were wrong and out of place. And using the HPC as a good example, and I use that one because we know it was started in 1973. So when we go and we look to when a board was initiated, when the Board of Aldermen said there shall be an HPC, and let's say they did that on August 15th of 1973. So a board is created on August 15th, right? And the Board of Aldermen wanted those seats to be staggered. And if we assume that there are 9 seats, the resolution will say, we hereby create an HPC as of today. And there'll be 9 seats. 3 of those appointees will serve a 1-year term. 3 more will serve a 2-year term. And the last 3 will serve a full 3-year term. That way, every year, 3 people roll off and 3 people roll on, or they're reappointed. That's how we set the stagger, right? So we know that on 8/15 of 73, we had 9 seats with those staggered terms. As the years went by, staff would do a good job, because typically it's easy in the early years to keep track, because we know everybody, right? By first name, we know everybody's term and we keep track of it. Well, after a decade or two, a staff person retires, a clerk retires, and one of the problems we had in New Bern is that some boards were administered by the city clerk, some by department heads. There are different committees in different departments, so we had different individuals keeping track of all these committees. It wasn't centralized. So as department heads turned over, city clerks turned over, the institutional knowledge was lost. And that nice, elegant August 15th of 73 with all the terms rolling turned into an appointment on October 7th of 76, and then there's an appointment in December of 82, and then we've lost, whose seat are you in, right? Because the seats were never numbered to keep track. The term is always tied to the seat, right? The first seat, seat 1, always rolls on the same cycle, as does seat 2. Well, when you lose track of that seat number, everything spirals. So in 2010, we put a good year effort into going back through all the archives, following every individual person, tracing them back to a seat to get all those terms correct. And we centralized that process to be run through the city clerk so that we could keep good checks and balances on that process. It has largely worked, with a couple little exceptions. One thing we found is the various boards were not created at the same time. Therefore, all the terms were expiring at different parts of the year. So 10 years ago, we fixed all of that except the HPC. We got all the terms expiring on June 30th. Why June 30th? That's the end of the government's fiscal year. So at the end of the fiscal year, the board knows, hey, it's appointment time. We need to check all of our boards and make sure we've got our appointees in place so that they can be seated at the first meeting in July. The HPC was a holdover. We didn't fix that one. It was created on May 15th of that particular year. So we have this May 15th, so it's an odd duck. So one of the issues, the administrative issues that we want to resolve is getting the HPC on that June 30th cycle. Okay? So what that would mean is if the Board of Aldermen chooses to do this, is that those people whose terms would expire or did expire 2 weeks ago, they will serve until the end of this June. That way everything is efficient and we minimize our opportunities to forget appointments. All right, so that is actually item F on your agenda. I'm working in reverse order. The next issue that has come up is the city's Appearance Commission. Created 20-some years ago, 25 years, not a very old commission. Again, authorized by state statute. Here's what we know about the Appearance Commission. 2 sentences I'm going to read to you. The Appearance Commission shall serve the Board of Aldermen in an advisory capacity and recommend programs to the board which it considers appropriate to enhance and improve the visual quality and aesthetic features of the city. It shall make recommendations to the board to facilitate planting, growth, protection of trees. A lot of local governments in East North Carolina call their Appearance Commission tree boards, which is much more accurate than the Appearance Commission. They regulate and make recommendation as to where trees go and when they should be taken down because of disease or rot or whatever. It's a tree board. When this was created, there was not a department in the city that took care of the trees. There was nothing. You had development services that took care of all the regulatory processes. You had public works that built streets. Now there were trees near the streets. The public works didn't take care of the trees. And you had a parks and recreation department that took care of the parks, and there were trees in the parks they took care of, but no one was responsible for citywide tree programs. That's where the Appearance Commission came in.
I came, before you proceed, I want something clarified. Obviously, if Public Works saw a tree that had a bad crack in it, was a danger. In the visual, the Public Works had the authority to...
They would just go tear it down. Right. They would just go cut it down. Right. There was no process. Can it live? Can it not live? We're going to cut it down, chop it up for firewood. It's gone.
Okay. And the distinction you're making is if they wanted to plant a whole pile of trees on Broad Street, for example, that's what you would need to have the tree commission for, or the... That
was the initial idea.
Okay.
Let's have someone to be the tree experts, the tree recommenders.
The trees are.
The trees are.
There we go.
Exactly. Thank you. So, it was created. New Bern is a tree city, part of the Tree City USA program. It was useful and helpful. I think it initially had 9 or 10 or 11 members. It had a bunch of members, 9, 10, or 11. Going back 4 or 5 years ago, we had to cut it down to 7 because we couldn't get a quorum to show up. Because here's what happened. 5, 6 years ago, the alderman put all the trees and all those tree processes under the Parks and Recs Department director, which I think makes a lot of sense. So now we have a director and all of his staff. They have gardeners on staff. We have a tree appeal process. If you think your tree is unhealthy, sick, danger, might fall on the street, we have a process to go assess it, deal with it, take a limb off, take the whole thing out. What tree goes back in? We have a process for that internally. So that largely gutted the fun and exciting stuff for the Appearance Commission to do. My theory is, as a result of that, nobody came to the meetings because there wasn't a whole lot to talk about and do. So we cut the board from 10 or 11 down to 7, trying to get a quorum in case we needed to do something, which they did. Since then, we've had folks resign. Alderman Odom has reached out to those folks to kind of triage, hey, why are you leaving? Why are you quitting? The answer was, hey, nice people, nothing to do. I'd rather be having dinner with my family rather than going to a meeting where there's really nothing exciting to talk about or do or contribute. Therefore, the Board of Aldermen wants to discuss whether or not keeping the Appearance Commission is in the city's best interest. They may conclude that it is. They may conclude that it's not. But that commission is created under the land use statutes. Therefore, I'm bringing it through you procedurally. I'd rather do that than not do it and be accused of not following a rule or being totally transparent. But I get the fact that that is a political issue, and you may not be in the best position tonight or a year from now of research to be in a position to make any recommendations, whether that makes any sense or not, because at the end of the day, it's largely a political question.
Scott, I got a question.
Yes,
So
sir.
you will,
Jeff.
yeah, I didn't
That
want to
guy.
call you what I usually call you.
It's all right. Rough ground. You've been working long enough to get whatever you want, man.
I call her Ruji. Okay, but anyway, several years back, on Martin Luther King, at that gas station, the man had these trees cut into teapots and all that kind of stuff. Do y'all remember that? And was that under that commission that was
No,
changed?
That wasn't, no.
That was kind of odd. wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that was state right away, so it was a DOT conversation with the DOT trimmers on how to not, that same time they notched out all the trees in front of Applebee's. Just notched them.
Yeah.
So it looks silly. So we had a conversation with them about doing a better job, and they have. But that wasn't. Now the Appearance Commission has had right now statutorily, their authority is over trees in parks and trees in the public right-of-way trees in the city of New Bern. But MLK, that's a DOT street.
And that would also extend into the DOT, but I don't expect anybody ETJ, but I don't expect anybody in ETJ to turn an oak tree into some sort of topiary.
You gotta have a street tree
That's
too,
what-
so a tree in your front yard is not the same as a street tree. They do have some authority there for recommendations on trees in the historic district, on private property. But that's the extent of their recommending authority.
Yeah, so very important to understand that this discussion that the Board of Aldermen is going to have at its upcoming meeting has nothing to do with anyone serving on the Appearance Commission, past, present, future. It's simply a discussion as to whether or not it makes the most sense and is the most efficient use of volunteer time in the city or not. Okay?
Scott?
Yes.
Sorry, quick question. So I presume, not unlike other boards, if there's nothing on the agenda, there's not a meeting for the Appearance Commission?
Correct.
So, how many meetings have they had in the
That's
last
a great
year or
question.
two?
I don't know. It's a handful.
Yeah.
It's just a handful.
I was invited to one.
Yeah, and I'm certain that the Board of Aldermen will weigh that in their decision. I was curious. I didn't find a whole lot in the way of minutes on the city website.
They don't need a lot.
Yeah.
And you give me a good segue. And this is what the Board of Aldermen and City Manager weigh and consider. Citizens don't recognize the tremendous amount of administrative time and expense and effort goes into each and every committee. You know how much time you spend reviewing your agenda and showing up. It's time consuming, right? It's an effort. It's multiples of that effort getting everything ready for you to be here. And it's a factor of 3, 4, and 5 times the effort. And it's top level effort. It's department head time, it's city manager time, it's legal time. It's the most expensive dollars go into supporting committees. And I would imagine the board is going to consider, hey, with respect to the appearance commission, are those resources better reallocated to get more done in other committees than where it's currently being allocated? Yes, sir.
I can't imagine that the appearance commission, did they have any notice that this meeting was taking place here in the planning and zoning department at all?
I do not know.
And
I'm not sure the last time they met, actually, to be honest with you.
And I was wondering, is it fair for us, I mean, as we're hearing essentially the city administration's views through you.
Right.
We do not have any kind of representation tonight from the appearance commission.
Right.
Okay.
Scott?
Yes, sir.
Before you continue, I just kind of want to make a point. And I know you're gonna caveat to the next thing
Yes.
here, so I don't want to
Yep.
cut you.
Yep.
Just give me 2 seconds. With this being said, I think we have all sat on this board for long enough to know if something is not being utilized correctly, and if the wickets, so to speak, are being covered now by Parks and Rec, to me, there is no point in having a commission that doesn't have a purpose to meet, because if Parks and Rec is now covering the trees and doing a good job at that, to me, the juice isn't worth the squeeze as far as utilizing the assets that we're talking about. So
Yes.
that's just my 2 cents. I know we're gonna carry on. So.
Yeah, and again, I want to say this too, and I don't say this, to let you off the hook, and I don't say this to steer you to any particular answer. This board sits to make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, if you want to or not. You don't have to make a recommendation. It's entirely possible that a person in your position might come to the conclusion, I've not vetted this thoroughly. I've not heard all the insides of this. This is much more of a political, financial question. We don't want to engage in that discussion at this point. So that's an option for you. Or you may take it up and kick it around all you like. But regardless, whether you make a recommendation or not, the Board of Aldermen are going to struggle with this issue. They may conclude that they want to keep it. I don't know.
Did they take in consideration that the surrounding community need representation when they talk about eliminating the 2 territorial positions?
I'm getting there right now.
Okay.
Let's use that as the segue for don't the appearance
Well,
commission.
I just want to go one
Yeah.
other question here. Now, you're saying the appearance commission is a misnomer. It only concerns trees. So,
Yes, sir.
so if the appearance commission, if they wanted to recommend like only cast iron accoutrements to a building, they would have something like that.
They could, well, not to structures necessarily, but they could propose a citywide beautification program where all the trash cans are a certain color and is of a certain style, and that would enhance the beauty of the city of New Bern. They could do that if they wanted to.
Historically, they never, it was strictly trees.
Trees, flowers, landscaping kind of issues, yes. Yeah.
Which are now, correct me if I'm wrong, being covered by Parks and Rec
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and public.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything they once did is all now covered by public works.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Which explains the attrition, why it's hard to find members to serve, because there are better ways to contribute your time and effort. Sure.
And this is under the purview of development services, I imagine.
No, right now it's underneath the Parks and Rec. That's the one board that's not under development services.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was invited to their December 2020 meeting, and it was 2.5 hours of trees.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Really?
Just to get a perspective, all the taking away from the trees and the streets in New Bern, the kept grading and putting back in that rubbish stuff.
Yes, sir.
Whose idea was it?
That's a great question.
That was Matt Montaigne.
Yeah, I will say Public Works
We were
came
having
up with that
problems
idea.
with the
Public
grates.
Works?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
trees were outgrowing the grates and
No,
Matt
no,
just found
just
Yeah.
a reason, I just wondered if
That's
they had.
that's an
anything to do-
excellent question, and that was Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, you knew Matt, Public Works Director, who's no longer here. But
He
yeah, the trees were outgrowing the grates, and the grates were also tripping hazards.
Yeah.
And that material solved both problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Looking at the commission, 7 members, there's 2 vacancies on now,
Yes, sir.
so there's only 5 now.
Yes, sir.
If it's up to date.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct. All right.
Let's continue the big,
Okay. Planning and Zoning Board. Two things are going on with the resolution of the Planning and Zoning Board. One is statewide new Chapter 160D. Chapter 160A in our general statutes is where all of the local government laws live. They all live in 160A. And up until last year, all the land use, the city land use laws were part of 160A. But going back 5 or 6 years, at the state level, we started working on modernizing statewide land use rules to make them less archaic, more user-friendly, easier to understand. And that process, started 5-6 years ago, led to the idea of pulling the land use regulations out of 160A and creating a new Chapter 160D, as in dog, where all of the land use rules will now live. So, going forward, each month going forward for the next 8 to 12 months, you will be seeing amendments to the land use ordinance to bring them into compliance with the new rules of 160D. I've got all the minimum housing ordinances ready. You'll see those next month. The Planning and Zoning Board came up first because it was bundled with Appearance Commission and the HPC term, and it was logical, hey, while we're looking and considering planning and zoning, let's look at updating it to be consistent with 160D. So when you see words and phrases changed, those are simply 160D suggestions. That's what the law requires, nothing for you to wring your hands over. The big issue to talk about is the size of the Planning and Zoning Board. Several aldermen over the years have raised the issue of the proportion of ETJ members to the entire board and whether or not that's appropriate. Again, no slight at all to anyone currently serving or anyone who has ever served. We go way, way back, and we've got some of our longest serving and best resources right here with us. So it is clearly not personal, and it's not reflective of those folks sitting in those seats. The question is purely a math question. When the city first added ETJ, it was the Rocky Run area, out there by Beatty Plum. And the statute provides that if a city is going to designate an extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is an area in which the land use rules will apply, they must appoint one person to the P&Z Commission when they do that. Rocky Run area, that corridor between New Bern and River Bend, going back in my early days, because I was here when that was done, was viewed as the growth corridor, right? We got that wrong. Turned out to be James City. But at the moment we thought Rocky Run, there were some apartments that were going to go back in there that never got built. And when those apartments were proposed, the city thought, along with the community, it might be helpful to have some control over signage and the billboards through there, as well as the construction to make sure things looked nice between New Bern and River Bend. And that's when the first seat was created, required by statute, created by ordinance. That makes total sense. The statute provides that when you have an ETJ, you must have at least one member, and you must have additional members consistent with the population proportions between an ETJ and your city proper. So if hypothetically, if you had a city with 20,000 people in it, and you added an ETJ area with 10,000 people in it, 10,000 plus 20,000 is 30,000. The 10,000 over 30 is 1/3. That means 1/3 of your board should be comprised of members of that ETJ, because their population needs to be in proportion to the board representation. Okay, that's the law. The first one was easy. The law requires it. I don't know, I know the history of the subsequent ETJs. Got the James City corridor that was done solely for the purpose of trying to help the county regulate signs. Billboards were a big deal 10, 20 years ago. Back in my earlier days, billboards were a blight, and they were virtually impossible to get down if you were in the county, and terribly problematic to get down if you were in a city or subject to an ETJ. So the county, for their reasons, did not want to regulate signs anywhere in the county. So the city stepped up to extend its ETJ out in that James City corridor down the highway to help with sign regulations. Now, the practical problem with that is you don't pick and choose in your ETJs which rules you're going to apply. All the land use rules apply. So what happens is the taxpayers in New Bern pay his department to go administer all that land area, all those signs, all that stuff for free, literally for free, right? They're not taxpayers, they're not contributing to the department, but the city is doing that in the hopes of making the general area more appealing. The final ETJ was over in the Sandy Point, Bridgeton area. So I think what happened is when the James City area was added, I think the governing board at that time thought, well, if Rocky Run's got its person, we'll get a James City person, and that makes common sense. And then when we got the Sandy Point area, we'll add somebody from there, and next thing you know, we end up with 3. So linearly, it makes total sense until you zoom out and look at the population representation. And what we have, and I don't have official numbers, they won't be released until mid-August, but I've got very close approximations to the population. The population of all the ETJ area is 520-some people, and the population of the city proper is 30,000 people. So we've got 1.8% of the population living in the ETJ, 1.8%, yet we have 30% representation on the board. So the thinking is to consider, and again, the Appearance Commission and this P&Z issue is for the board's consideration. They may do nothing. To consider whether or not they want to reduce the 3 county ETJ seats to 1 seat to bring the ratio from 30% down to 12.5%, recognizing that the number of bodies is actually 1.8%. That's the issue, as simple as that. And the reason that we've got 2 holdover folks in our ETJ positions is the board has been reflecting on this and struggling with this as to what they may or may not do, and didn't want to do anything as they thought it through. For a couple reasons. One, they want, whatever they do, they want it to be effective June 30th, so that everyone gets a full term. There's no intent in this process to do anything to suggest that every volunteer board member hasn't contributed in a great way. If you change seats or eliminate seats mid-term, it leaves the impression that somebody wasn't doing their best or contributing, and that's not the case at all. In fact, here, to the contrary, they've had 2 of our TG members serve for a year beyond the end of their prior terms. So that speaks volumes to the respect that the Board of Aldermen has given to those volunteers. So that's the issue that the Board of Aldermen is going to be struggling with. And I know it sounds, well, it doesn't sound, it is to me awkward and uncomfortable to ask the very board that is doing all of this to reflect on whether or not 2 of its members should maintain seats or not. I totally get that. And again, it is something that you can recommend to the board, either way you see, or decline the invitation to make a recommendation. But again, that's what the Board of Aldermen is going to be considering. What they ultimately do, I truly have no idea. I really don't. They may talk it through and conclude the current way is the best thing ever. But several of them have raised the question whether or not it is fair to all of the citizens of New Bern who are paying for all these efforts for their representation to be diluted numerically, which doesn't speak to the people, it's just the math.
You bring that up numerous times.
Yeah.
During the Constitutional Convention, there was a big question about that. And the little state of Connecticut had the solution of a bicameral legislative branch. That is a Senate, which is not proportionally representative, and a House of Representatives that was. The problem this member sees is that we have extremely little representation in what the city wants to do for us. It all comes down to the Board of Aldermen. They can overrule any kind of recommendations we make. They do not have to heed our recommendations if they wish not to. But by having extra representation in the ETJ, many members in the ETJ would appreciate that. The Board of Aldermen can approve things on Rocky Run, in Sandy Point, in the James City area, which is not really representative too much of population. I question your figure of 500. I live right next to a door to an apartment complex that has at least 100 cars in it. And I'm sure on Rocky Run there are more than that, so you might want to review that. I believe the figures you are reviewing are from 2010, which is the last available census you have.
We're using existing houses and extrapolating from dwellings, apartment dwellings and homes. We're extrapolating using the standard family size of 2.2, I want to say. 2.25. So we could be wrong, but I suspect we're going to be in the ballpark. And we're using the same metrics on the city and the ETJ. So these are ballpark discussions, but in no universe are we near 10, 20, 30%.
Now, I refer to this as ham-fisted because the members of the county government had no knowledge of this coming on, and it was dropped on us essentially with only 2 working days. And Mr. Veet, the county manager, was scheduled for vacation this week, so we didn't have time to do it. We also don't know, and we haven't had the time to research it, if there's any kind of agreements between the county and the city, and you weren't able to answer that.
There are no legally binding agreements, no, sir. I can say it definitively. There is no such thing allowed by law.
When I asked you earlier, you didn't have an answer for me.
Well, I was reflecting on the folklore. I can tell you folklore, and I think the folklore, not the county so much, but every time we add one, we are going to simply add a person who lives in that area, because I think it made political sense at that time.
Well, the political sense is that, I don't know where you are personally, but the county and the city don't really get along. And this just exacerbates the relationship from the county side.
I hope you're over-dramatizing that relationship.
I don't think so.
But I don't do politics, so I simply don't know.
Well, I have conversations with them many times a month. And my conversations basically reflect that there is a state of almost civil war between the two of you. You got very upset that even though the county was flipping most of the bill, where some members of the city board wanted to have a 911 center located within the city, the county decided to put it outside the city. I told you personally, I've been lobbying and had some success trying to get the city, DOT, as well as the county, provide funding to have County Line Road paved, which would be a wonderful solution.
Absolutely.
And it's creating a lot of bad tension. To make a change like that involving the ETJ without proper notice, and notice given on the 11th hour, is not the way to conduct business with a spirit of good feelings like our country had in the 1820s. It was abrasive to the members that I spoke to in the county government, and they were really disappointed that they weren't given more notice.
Something I'm sure the Board of Aldermen will reflect on at their meeting next week.
Well, Scott, how do you suggest we proceed? Should we do this in regular order?
Any way you'd like. Those are the three issues.
Yeah, let's.
I did the reverse order, but you
Yeah.
can certainly take them in the order on your agenda.
Yeah, so 2D would be our next action.
Okay, well, 2D is the big one, I think.
Yeah.
And I would like to hear the comments, all members of this, especially the members who are appointed to represent different wards.
Quick question, Scott. Is there any sentiment from the Board of Aldermen, at least that we're aware of this? Probably a question for Jeff or anybody, any of the members of staff. Any sentiment redrawing the lines ETJ at all?
No.
None of that's
No.
changed? No sentiment there? Okay.
That's a tough issue.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
I'll make a comment about that. My term, as Scott was saying, should have been over quite some time ago. That's not my fault, of course. But I'm willing to serve as long as it takes for someone to find a replacement for my seat. But finding someone, as you say, is the big issue, finding people who will serve in these voluntary positions. But in reflection on what he's saying, within good spirit of things, to just drop it out would not be a good thing. For I know since I've been serving on this board that people in my area tend to come to ask me questions about things I don't even know, but it causes me to go get additional information. Without having a good representation in some level, people will be left in the cold and have zero knowledge about what's going on. That would not be a good idea for the growth and betterment of the city's image or any other reason. So they should consider that the representation for the people who are already within the City of New Bern is covered by their local alderman anywho. So these people in the ETJ have no input really other than word, because of course we're not putting tax money in. But we do serve the tax base because we do all our business in the City of New Bern. Not all, the vast majority of our business is done within the City of New Bern. So we do contribute to the tax base. So the retail here is definitely getting money off of the other towns and communities attached to it. So the aldermen, I think, are a little off base and is a little more excessively politicized on that issue than we probably really know. Because everybody's best friend got a good friend that they go sit back at home and discuss other things later. I can't say this man, I actually do not sit and talk about what's going on this board. But I do know the higher up you get into the politics of any community, the more behind closed doors secrecy happens. It's just the way humankind is. But I don't think the city is on the right track with trying to eliminate 2 seats I think that would be a terrible misstep in the decision-making for the aldermen of the city of New Bern. I'm already supposed to be gone. I don't mind staying.
So, kind of caveat, I guess, on what he just said. Is it possible to shave one seat down?
Sure.
Vice two?
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
maybe come to a compromise? Because here's what I see happening. He's already alluded to it, you just alluded to it too. The aldermen are gonna vote regardless of what we say. So if we sit here and say, well, we just wanna table it, we're really not doing, we're doing a disservice to not only our board, but we're also doing a disservice to the aldermen and to the city and to your people that you represent. So I think maybe it would be better to see if we could come up with an alternate solution to maybe shave one seat, vice chop both of them, and without doing that. I'll wait till we go on and talk about the other two, but that's just food for thought for me.
I think that's certainly an idea that has merit, but let me remind the vice chairman that right now I haven't been able to get responses to the legality of this from the county yet. So if we do anything and whatnot, maybe we should consult the county if there was some kind of agreement that we don't know about.
If I have a bad time to do this, it's just that the whole nation is a little sensitized on, and I hate bringing this up, racially and all other kind of leads. So I think I think the city should back off that for a little bit. I don't think it's a financial hit that's hard enough that we should make a rash, quick decision the city should make a quick, rash decision without deeply looking into this, because like I was just saying, the whole nation's a bit sensitized about representation, voting, and all those kind of things. So they better walk real lightly when they make that decision, because every community right now is awake.
Yes, sir, and I do appreciate those thoughts. The practical problem you have is that when you appoint people for 3-year terms, the last thing you ever want to do is tell a volunteer that their time is over before the end of their term. It feels like firing a volunteer, which is terrible bad form, in my view.
Let me just respond also. But what harm is it doing to even keeping both seats? We're not getting paid.
Right.
It's strictly a voluntary thing. And
Sure.
it's hard to get people to volunteer nowadays.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So what is the purpose?
Yeah.
I mean, because, it's a disservice to the community. I mean, they need representation.
Right.
I'm doing it because I'm retired out of New York, you know what I'm saying? I don't need a headache, you know what I'm saying? I just come and I met my buddies, they all from New York, you know what I'm saying? There's 4 of us in here from New York.
Sure.
So
We need to have a vote on that.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just playing.
We get 2 votes.
That's right.
We need one more New Yorker, that's what you're
Just
saying,
kidding.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Scott, are the ETJ seats, are they appointed from county commissioners?
One county, the chair seats, Don's seat is appointed by the county, the other 2 are city, aldermen.
Okay, so aldermen are appointed seats.
There's
Okay.
3
There are
ETJ
3
seats. Yes, sir.
I didn't remember that.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, we're going with Sonny. What comments do you have? What are your thoughts?
This is the first I'm hearing it, so I'm having trouble just analyzing it.
Sure.
On one hand, I agree, what would be the difference? I think the more input you have, the better off you are. I don't know
It was about
why
meeting a quorum, wasn't it? Wasn't it concerned about the number it takes to create a quorum?
Well, Scott,
Yeah, but that can be part of the problem is creating the quorum. Yeah, exactly.
correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm off base here, but I don't think I am. I think that based on where we're at as far as census, as far as redrawing the wards, all the things that are hanging fruit, as we know, I think this is this is the rare time when they're trying to correct some of this stuff that's been out of whack for so long. I don't think it's a personal attack on the planning
No,
and
it
zoning
isn't.
board.
No, I
think it's,
agree.
but I think it's these three things that came up. I think this is the rare time when they can try to fix everything all at once because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what they're trying to do
It's
because
that simple.
as of last week, it's the same thing goes for the city elections. We talked about that, right? So
Exactly.
we don't even know when the city election is going to be. So I think right now, I think they're trying to put everything back as if it was supposed to be fixed a long time ago. And I think that's where we're at.
I think that's entirely reasonable, but to drop something on, that the county has no knowledge of, didn't you speak to your supervisor?
Scott, if I may interrupt and ask a question, so the two seats that the aldermen are considering dropping, are that two seats appointed by the aldermen?
Of course.
Yeah, those are appointed by the alderman, so it wouldn't affect the county.
Right, so the county still is appointed?
Oh, yeah. And by
That's
statute.
what I thought, but I
No,
wanted to make sure.
yeah, thank you for saying that out loud. Yeah, the statute requires that the one minimum person is appointed by the county. Yeah. And there are cycles where the county does not make the appointment, the city ends up making the appointment.
Right.
Marshall, do you have anything to add?
So that's so,
Harry,
let me see if I
do you
can
have anything
understand.
to add?
So two of the aldermen will lose
Okay, Mr. Patrick?
their representatives.
No.
Rotating.
The board at large, so aldermen appoint each of you, and then the two ETJ seats are appointed at large. The board of aldermen
Right.
just takes any in they want.
Okay.
Yeah, so no alderman is losing an appointee.
And then the one
In
county
the one county.
would be.
The county
from the
always has
county,
its
right.
appointee. But listen, these are all good thoughts. They're thoughts that I've reflected on, boards reflected on. I'm not a public official. I helped administer this process. I'm the messenger. I've been through enough of this in 30 years that I won't be a bit surprised at the end of the next board meeting where the board wants to keep the appearance commission and give them more stuff to do and wants to add to the planning and zoning board. Who knows?
With that being said, can we come, I'm just asking, can we come back to this one? Because I kind of wanted to know what everybody thought about disbanding the appearance commission. I mean, it kind of sounds like that should be a low hanging fruit there. I mean, if everything is being already covered by the Parks and Rec, and that commission falls under the Parks and Rec anyway, why do we even have it still? I mean, to me, my recommendation would be that we disband the appearance commission, and let's we can circle back to the other two, but
The only thing I would stipulate is if, as per our understanding, that the usefulness of the appearance commission has been taken over by the Parks Department, it ergo has no reason to exist.
I think that's the majority conclusion.
And listen, I can appreciate that being a factual concern that you can't answer fully. And if that's a basis to punt on that issue, I get it. I'm happy to take recommendation back. I'm happy to report that that's just beyond your pay grade on that particular issue.
I think we've heard from everybody now, but Patrick, what is your concerns on this item concerning the eliminating seats?
Yeah. Well, I'm in my second term. I filled in for Ward 6. Jeffrey asked me to serve when I guess a fine gentleman from Greenbrier had a stroke. So I filled out his my first term is filling out his second term, I guess, and now I'm been appointed again, or asked to stay in this time. In the 4 years I've been here, I would say the three members we have on the from the county are usually always here. They've had a lot of fine things to say, and I hate to see actually go number one myself at this point. That's how I feel. I'm supporting them, that I think they should stay on.
Are there any more afterthoughts, comments? Now, we have three options we can make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen to approve this item, which would eliminate 2 seats. We have the option to disapprove the agenda item, and we have the third to
Just recommend 1 seat.
make no recommendation on it.
That's right, that's right, that's right. That's right.
Because it's really, the Board of Aldermen have the final decision on this anyhow, because it is a change to the,
These being presented to us tonight as a courtesy.
yeah.
It makes sense.
Actually, it's not
It
quite,
makes sense because
it's not quite a courtesy. You said that you had to.
It's a legal requirement,
It's a-
and I'm.
It's essentially, it's a courtesy.
Exactly, I'm erring on the side of
Yeah.
taking the most extreme view of procedure,
Right.
but I recognize this is a technical review board. I've told you folks that many times. Your expertise is in setbacks and lot sizes, not politics and not board sizes and term endings. But because those committees are in this statute, I'm bringing it here so that I can check my box. I went above and beyond to make sure that all of the procedures were followed.
And I appreciate any proposed amendments to the land use ordinance coming before the board. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
That's your job, yes, sir.
Well,
Yes.
let's get brass tacks here. I'm gonna move that we recommend that we keep the board the way it is.
Okay.
That's my motion, and if somebody wants to second it and vote
Okay,
against it.
so let me just clarify that. So what you are proposing is a motion to refuse the adjustment to the land use ordinance concerning the planning and zoning board. We have a motion. Is that motion seconded?
Second.
And we have a motion, and motion seconded. Can we please conduct a roll call?
And if I would just clarify, that would be with respect to the seat, the number of seats.
Number of seats.
Are we okay with the other changes, which are statutory? The other edits that you saw in there are just out of the new statute?
Yes.
Don't think you're changing things material. Okay.
Yeah, but, and we're going to get to the appearance board in item E.
Separately.
Separately, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
We're on one item.
Okay, we have a motion seconded.
Don Black,
I approve.
Pat Doherty,
Yes.
Aaron Beatty,
Yes.
Raymond Layton,
Yes.
Marshall Ballard,
Yes.
Travis Oakley,
Yes.
Tony Ozera.
Yes.
All right, motion carried.
I note that the motion carries unanimously. On to item E, which is to consider amendment to the City of New Bern land use ordinance regarding the relevance and continued necessity of the appearance commission. Now, as our general understanding is, it's basically a toothless lion in that they're not responsible for any
It's kind of like overlapping.
Through no fault of their own.
No, I understand.
and my understanding was that they needed to develop some kind of board as this, so we could be members of the Tree USA City.
But that's some folklore. I don't know that that's 100% true. It's the folklore that I'm aware of, but I do know that it was created because there was a gap in city services and no one was responsible for being the trees are.
And that has been corrected by
That has
the
been
park.
corrected. Yes, sir. Robustly.
Explain one more time, if you would, why they decided to give it to Parks. What was going on?
It was haphazard. I think somebody mentioned, I think the chairman mentioned, a citizen calls in, I think there's a dead tree on my street. Parks and Work would go out, they'd get a guy from the crew who had a chainsaw, and they go, yep, it looks bad to me. And then the other neighbors would call and scream, you just killed a great tree, why'd you kill that?
He was 300 years old.
And they're like, you know what, we need to get some expertise in here and apply some thought and logic to this, and that's when Parks and Rec, built the staff to do that. The Board of Aldermen gave them the resources. We created rules and policies and procedures to address when, where, how, and why as to every tree. And as that happened, that started with the tree board, And then over time, it morphed into,
How often does the tree board meet?
supposed to be monthly.
So-
Well, the appearance commission, I should not call them the tree board, it's
Okay,
my
the
bad.
Appearance Commission.
How dare you? I know.
So, technically, if there was a problem in front of your house,
Yes,
it would take a month, it may take a month for them to sit and discuss it.
yes, sir, yes.
Okay, but right now, the parks guy would come out and say, I have my saw, I'm taking it back.
The parks guy could come out, bring a tree, bring an arborist in, notify the parties, they could appeal it, bring in their experts, and we get to the bottom of it.
But Parks Department has arborists on staff.
And they have the resource.
They have an arborist on staff,
Okay.
yes. Last 2 years now.
So the residents, if it's in front of someone's home, that resident is notified in advance.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tagged the tree, it's got a little note on it,
Yeah.
the whole thing.
People love trees. People love trees.
Oh, I'm a tree lover.
Me too.
So I'd like to make a motion to disband the appearance commission.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and seconded. Can we have a roll call, please?
Helen Black,
Yay.
Pat Doherty,
Yes.
Aaron Beatty,
Yes.
Raymond Layton,
Yes.
Marshall Ballard,
Yes.
Alex Oakley,
Yes.
Sonia Luzo.
Yes, it seems so callous that we just said, no, we're keeping us to where we
I
are.
get it, I get it.
New York.
I get it.
Maybe I should say that.
Let me just clarify, that was a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen.
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay, so now we come to the
last-
calendar issue. Item F is to consider an amendment to the City of New Bern Land Use Ordinance to establish a June 30th termination date for each term on the Historic Preservation Commission. And this was in line with the discussion we had about making the dates the same so that they could be better filled and keep the terms.
Normalizing.
Normalizing, that's the word,
Normalizing.
thank you, should have said that.
Okay. Do we have a motion on approving item F?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we recommend adoption of the amendment to change the termination date for terms on the HPC to June 30th.
We have a motion. Is there a
Second.
motion? Can we have a roll call, please?
Helen Black,
Yay?
Pat Doherty,
Yes.
Aaron Beatty,
Yes.
Raymond Layton,
Yes.
Marshall Ballard,
Yes.
Alex Oakley,
Yes.
Sonia Luzo.
Yes,
Motion passes.
I'd like to advise that that is unanimous. Now, we had an open discussion point, and Jeff and I were talking earlier today to address the issue of development size vis-a-vis the amount of egresses. So we came to a agreement that any lot, any planned development, any application before us of over 150 units should have at least 2 egresses. And we would like to discuss the idea of adding that as an amendment to the land use ordinance as a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen.
So I got Scott here, kept me here for a reason. These were amendments that actually went to the Board of Aldermen about 4 or 5 years ago.
In a big package.
Part of a
I remember
larger
that.
amendment package, that was our final update to our land use plan. A lot of things were in there. Most, the issue that ultimately killed it was the cul-de-sac, width of the cul-de-sacs, even though we did reach a really good compromise.
And we had
between the
feedback
development-
from the fire
between the
department.
development community and the fire department on that, and it failed at the board level, which in doing so, they threw out all the amendments. One of the amendment in there, which was universally agreed upon, which actually developers are doing now anyways, was the fact that we don't have a language in our ordinance that dictates how many points of access are required for subdivisions when they reach a certain size. So in theory, you could have a 3,000 lot subdivision with 1 point of access. The compromise we made through our 18 months of meetings we had with the development community was 150 lots was a good number to require 2 points of access. So Don called me today and said he'd like to see that put through, see that amendment put through to the land use code. And so my question to you, because you're standing here, is we've already been through the process. It's already been approved by P&Z in the past. And is it simply just pushing it back up in front of the board again, or do we have to go?
No.
Do they have to make a motion to?
Yeah, it'll have to come back before us for another recommendation.
Well, yeah, this is like the Airbnb issue. You don't have inherent power to start things.
Yeah.
Citizens can make requests, the city can make requests, the aldermen, and they request, and they make a request of you. You can ask the board, like the Airbnb, hey, we'd like to take this up. Would you like us to take this up? And they can say, yeah, kick it around and bring something back to us. Or they may say, hey, thanks for asking. Don't waste your time because the answer is no.
Right.
So this would be in the form of petition? Can we formally make it?
Yeah, I think you just do a letter, a motion to draft a letter to the Mayor Board of Aldermen requesting direction as to this particular issue. And then if that's a majority vote, the chairman would sign a letter, it goes to the board on the agenda, and the board can go, oh, interesting, let's do it, let's hear you out, or, we heard it once, we're okay.
So you would be responsible to write the petition letter for us.
All right.
And
just recent.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Jeff can write it.
Yeah.
Do we have enough to make a motion for this petition tonight? Do you need to have it formalized first?
No. You could just, motion be direct staff to write a letter, requesting to the board, give you authority to explore the connectivity and ingress-egress issues as to local subdivisions, and let you know if you can pursue that or not.
Okay, I move what he said.
Yeah.
We have a motion
Let's close it up.
So the board gives somebody permission to speak for it.
Direct staff to draft that letter for your chairman's signature.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Is that motion seconded?
Second.
We have a motion seconded. Roll call, please.
John Black,
Yay.
Pat Doherty,
Yes.
Aaron Beatty,
Yes.
Raymond Layton,
Yes.
Marshall Bauer,
Yes.
Travis Oakley,
Yes.
Sonny Luzo,
Yes.
motion passes.
And I'd like to note that that's been unanimous. I believe that brings us to conclusion to all business, except is there anybody else that would like to add?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you very much. Good to see everybody. Have a nice evening.
I just want to pursue having the head of the departments continue coming. This was very good, but we kind of knew that water and sewer was okay, so I'm guessing we just brought that as a beginning just to warm us up. Fire and police are really what I would like to talk about.
I agree with that. Yeah.
All right.
The other thing with the fire
zoning lecture series.
Yes, continue to lecture.
I'd like to get
Extend the invite.
the new chief. We'll get the new police chief in next time.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll put it on the schedule. If not, you can get Bobby Boyd or Danny Hill, who's more, Danny's more of the liaison for development in the fire department, so he's much more versed in those aspects of it, and he's been around a long time, so he knows the operation well. So sure, we'll get one of those on the next one.
If I'm not mistaken, I think when we discussed it with the fire department, they were kind of okay with 150 houses.
Yep. Yeah, they were, yeah.
Nobody knew what that
Wait
meant.
until they bring in HR.
Nobody knew where the number came from,
Human
but it was
resources
okay
driven.
with them.
Okay.
Good luck,
Yeah,
then.
we
See
had a
you guys
really
next
good
month.
compromise on that cul-de-sac.
Oh, we'll all be getting it.
You're right.
Like a, make a motion to adjourn?
We have a motion to adjourn. Is it motion, is it been second?
Yeah.
Roll call, please.
Roll call, Don, you don't have to roll call and everything.
John Black,
Yay.
Pat Doherty,
Yes.
Aaron Beatty,
Yes.
Raymond Layton,
Yep.
Marshall Bauer,
Yes.
Travis Oakley,
Yes.
Sonny Luzo.
Yeah, I want to stay.
That's why you don't roll call.